Welcome to the Love Government. I'm Dennis Leary, and we are doing a series of videos called Sex Signs, and we are now on the 14th episode of Sex Signs. I was saying prior to this that Pandora is one of the mythical people who exemplifies certain philosophical ideas. So Pandora was the woman, the first mortal woman, according to the Greeks, and she means gifted, all gifted. Pandora means all gifted. The second person that we use in a philosophical sense is panacea. Pandora and then panacea. Panacea means all health. It's healthy, healthy, healthy. So that's what we want in the love government system. We want health, happiness, joy, and panacea has a bad name because it's been saddled with the idea that it's not possible. A panacea is a pure fiction that we could never, ever have. That's not exactly true. You can have a panacea right now, but you might not be able to transpose it fully into the physical realm. But you can have a panacea in your heart, you can have a panacea in your mind, in your emotions. If you want that bad enough, you can build it up, but you may not be able to implement it fully in the physical realm because the physical realm is the most difficult one to implement those kind of qualities. The next person, daughter, that I want to mention is panorama. Now I'm just playing with words here, but these are going to be the three P's in the love system to contrast with the three P's in the patriarchal system. So panorama, it's pretty obvious, is a woman who can see with a broad vision. It's like being on the moon and seeing from that perspective, or a high perspective on a mountain. So you have a panoramic vision of things. That's also called a philosophy, if you can get the big picture. In the love government, we're attempting to show the big picture, which means we can see where we came from, we can see where we are, and we can see where we're going and how to get there. These are just playing with ideas, and philosophy is really play. Philosophy comes from a woman point of view, a woman metaphor. All of language, which is basically a web of signs, reduces itself to metaphors which are based in nature. All of them, even the most mathematical, scientific, they all take their base from metaphors that have to do with the earth and primarily have to do with woman and her children and in nature before it was rewritten by patriarchy. We are talking about sex signs. So there are three basic types of sex signs. There's unisexual. You've heard of unisex, which means it's just one sex. It's kind of hard for us to imagine how that can be, but it can be carried off, kind of. But we relate to the second category, which is bisexual. Not in the sense that a person has sex with a man and a woman, but bisexual because there are two sexes. That's built into our nature. It's such a basic thing that we tend to overlook it. In the love government, we introduce a third concept, and that's trisexual. Trisexual, what does that mean? It means a third element in sex. Third element. It could be three people having sex together, but in the love government, we focus on the lover as the third element, or the first element. So two lovers are two lovers. They're bi. There's two sexes. But the love government advocates for introducing the third element, which is that makes a triangle. And that is the lover, or the love triangle. And we talked about that especially in the Love Cards series of the love triangle, which is a woman's triangle, and it is down here at her vulva area, pointing to the vulva and pointing further down to the earth. It's a woman's triangle because it has the point downward in the earth, as opposed to the other triangle, which is a patriarchal triangle up here in the chest, and then it's usually euphemized and sentimentalized and romanticized as not a triangle, but a kind of a heart shape. It gets kind of like tricky. The rewrites and the propaganda gets a little tricky. When we hear about sex, we hear about the war of the sexes. That indicates something has gone wrong. If there's a war of the sexes, and there is, that is the basic problem that we have, is that there is a war of sex going on in the area of sex. And it's really a war in the area of sex signs. That's why we're talking about sex science. Because our problems are coming from the sign language that we use in sex. It shows up, of course, on the level of a person's life and his or her relationships, which start out often very nice, but end up not so good, because something is wrong, and basically there is a war going on. It looks like this, bang, 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 or like this, pushing and pulling, or this, pushing up, pulling down. There's a war going on. But what we're interested in is the structural part of it, which is the philosophy on the high levels, the big levels, the big picture. And there the war is patriarchy on the one side and loverarchy on the other. Her history is that we came from Africa, and we were a new species that appeared on the scene in Africa, and we were lovers. We were made lovers. We were true lovers in our origin story. It's more than a story, it's a reality. But the mythical story, say, of the Garden of Eden, says that there was a garden situation, earthly garden where we went out and picked our food and so on. We lived there, embedded in nature, and that was where we had our start. This is the sign of who we are. In the love garden, we start with that sign and we tap into the love culture, call that the love culture. And to simplify it so that it's graspable and understandable, we say that it was 100,000 years ago in East Africa by the big lake, formerly called Lake Victoria, because our species was centered on woman focal, matrilineal, etc. And that introduces water element, so it would be natural that we appeared by big bodies of water. When the climate changed, whatever that was, and Africa became kind of dried up, there's also scientists are uncovering this part of the story, that we went down to the southern tip of Africa, and we lived there, and we survived by eating shellfish, sea shells, because they found a cave filled with shells, and they must have found some traces of our species, bones or something, putting it all together, until Africa greened up again. We were down there also. Anyway, we were from Africa. The type of philosophy that we follow is that of loving, as I say, as opposed to that of being, which is more boxed up. The box of being is more boxy. And it comes from patriarchy, introduced by the patriarchal philosophers who box things up because you can control them, you can monetize it, you can get benefits from it. But we believe in a philosophy of loving, not exactly being. And that means it's relative. All of our signs are relatives of each other. We live in a sign world. being world as such. And we cannot really relate to an absolute being. You can't understand absolute being, such as God is supposed to be, or the absolute whole, or the totality. Because, why can't you do that? Because then you would be the absolute. The only way that you could see the absolute was if you were the absolute. So, it's contradictory. And then you get into, somebody has to be seeing you in order to recognize you as the absolute. Then you get an infinite regression, which turns into absurdity. Anyway, the best way of approaching these knowledge issues, what you know and what you love, is the natural method. Use nature as the basic metaphor. Organic nature. That's where we get our life, our truth, our happiness, our joy. Everything goes back to nature. And in our language, which is science, we're talking about sex science, it's all metaphorical. Metaphorical means meta, it means beyond or with, beyond. And the other part of for is to mean to carry or to bear. So you carry it beyond. It's metaphorical. There's always more, always more, always more. Each sign points to something else. Like I said, well, sex, what's sex? Using the metaphorical method, sex points to all kinds of things. But mainly it points to love. Sex and love go together. And then love points. Anyway, you get a whole system of these interacting signs. And that's the flowing method. We've talked about that before. How we flow, we dance, we love, and we keep moving so we don't get stagnant. Another idea that comes up in this context is, what about equality? What about man and woman being equal? Is that true? Is that true? Well, it is, in my opinion, it is and it isn't. In nature, there is no absolute equality. Everything you look at has got an unbalanced nature to it. One is always primary, something is secondary. But again, using the being type of box method, put things in boxes. In the boxes called politics, law, legality, job opportunities, payment for jobs, which is all like a patriarchal system. There, you pretend that things are equal. You force it. Man and woman are equal in this area, and that's enforced by law because that's what the people want, and they believe in equality. I said equality has a use, but if you look into nature, nothing is absolutely equal in nature. And so that's why it's perfectly reasonable and logical to say that woman is the priority and man is the secondary element. Man was meant to be the helper to woman, contrary to the Bible and other patriarchal documents. Thank you for being with us on this journey through the sex signs. It's actually very sexy, but we're going deep sex, not surface stuff. And then when we get that, then life beauty becomes beautiful. Thank you. And sign off with the love. So there's many different signs we can use. There's something called the sign of the crest. Not the sign of the cross, that's patriarchal. The sign of the crest is like this, because the crest is down here, and the sign rests on that. So we go in the name of the lover, the mother, and the father. Woman. Love. Always love. Thank you.